The toolbox crashed to the floor, metal clanging against concrete, and I froze, heart pounding like a drum in a silent room. My neighbor, Ethan, stood inches away, his breath warm against my cheek, his blue eyes searching mine with an intensity that made the air feel electric. I'd come to fix his garage light, but now, in the flickering glow of a dying bulb, something unspoken was unraveling between us. I'd lived next door to Ethan Caldwell for 3 years in our quiet suburban corner of Portland, Oregon. He was the all-American guy, broad shoulders, sandy blonde hair, and a smile that could charm a snake. Married to Sarah, a sweet elementary school teacher, he was the kind of man who mowed his lawn every Saturday and waved at everyone on the block. Me? I'm Jamie Harper, the guy who keeps to himself, tinkering with electronics in my garage and nursing a quiet crush on Ethan that I'd buried deeper than a winter snowdrift. That evening, Ethan had knocked on my door, his usual confidence tinged with something else. Nervousness, maybe? Hey, Jamie, the garage light's acting up again. You're good with this stuff, right? His voice was casual, but his eyes lingered a fraction too long. I grabbed my toolbox, ignoring the flutter in my chest, and followed him across the lawn. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the air carried the crisp scent of autumn leaves. Inside his garage, the fluorescent light buzzed like a trapped bee, casting erratic shadows over stacks of boxes and a gleaming vintage motorcycle Ethan had been restoring for months. It's been flickering for days, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. Sarah's been on me to fix it, but I'm useless with wiring. I nodded, setting my toolbox down and climbing the stepladder he'd set up. As I unscrewed the fixture, Ethan stayed close, handing me tools when I asked, his presence a steady warmth at the edge of my focus. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked suddenly, his voice low, almost drowned out by the hum of the light. I glanced down, surprised. Ethan was leaning against the workbench, arms crossed, staring at the floor like it held answers to questions he hadn't voiced. Portland's nice, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck in someone else's life. I fumbled with the screwdriver, my pulse quickening. You? Stuck? You got the perfect setup, wife, house, that motorcycle you're always bragging about. I tried to keep my tone light, but his words had cracked open a door I'd kept locked. Ethan chuckled, but it was hollow, not his usual easy laugh. Yeah, perfect, he muttered, and when he looked up, his eyes caught mine, raw and unguarded. I turned back to the fixture, heart hammering. Focus, Jamie. Just fix the damn light. But my hand shook as I stripped the wires, and when Ethan handed me a pair of pliers, our fingers brushed. It was nothing, just a fleeting touch, but it sent a jolt through me, sharp and undeniable. I glanced at him, and he didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar of his cologne. Jamie, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, you ever feel like you're hiding something? Something big. My breath caught. I wanted to laugh it off, to say something sarcastic, but the weight in his gaze stopped me. This wasn't the Ethan I knew, the guy who tossed footballs with the neighborhood kids. This was someone else, someone unraveling. Before I could answer, the light above us flickered violently and went out, plunging the garage into near darkness. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of our breathing. Then, without warning, Ethan reached out, his hand grazing my arm. Don't move, he said, and there was a tremor in his voice, like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. I didn't move. I couldn't. My toolbox slipped from my grip, crashing to the floor, and in that moment, Ethan closed the distance between us. His face was inches from mine, his eyes searching, desperate, like he was drowning, and I was the only thing keeping him afloat. The world narrowed to the space between us, charged with 1,000 unsaid things. What are we doing, Ethan? I whispered, my voice shaking. He didn't answer, but his hand slid to the back of my neck, warm and steady, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. This was impossible. Ethan was straight, married, my neighbor, but the way he looked at me, the way his thumb brushed my skin, told a different story. The garage door rattled suddenly, and we sprang apart, hearts racing. Sarah's voice called from outside, cheerful and oblivious. "Ethan? Jamie? You guys fixed that light yet?" Reality crashed back like a wave, cold and relentless. Ethan's face shuddered, the vulnerability gone, replaced by the mask of the perfect husband. "Yeah, almost done," he called back, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding mine. I grabbed my toolbox, my hands trembling, and climbed back up the ladder, focusing on the wires like my life depended on it. But my mind was a storm, replaying that moment, the heat of his touch, the question in his eyes. As I reconnected the wires, the light flickered back on, bathing the garage in cold, sterile light. Ethan stepped back, shoving his hands in his pockets, and I felt the distance between us grow, not just physical, but something deeper, like a door slamming shut. "Thanks, Jamie," he said, his voice flat. "I owe you one." I nodded, unable to speak, and left the garage, the weight of what had almost happened pressing against my chest. Back in my own house, I sank onto the couch, staring at the toolbox I'd left by the door. What the hell had just happened? Ethan was straight. He had to be. But that moment, that look, it was real. And it left me breathless, caught between hope and fear, wondering what came next. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Ethan's lawnmower, a steady drone that felt like a mockery of the chaos in my head. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cup forgotten in my hand, watching him push the machine across his perfect lawn. His movements were deliberate, mechanical, like he was trying to outrun something. Last night's moment in the garage haunted me, his hand on my neck, the raw edge in his voice. I wanted to believe it was a fluke, a trick of the dim light, but my skin still burned where he'd touched me. I avoided my garage all day, afraid of running into him. Portland's autumn chill had settled in, and the neighborhood was quiet, leaves skittering across the street. I busied myself with a broken radio, but my hands fumbled, my focus shattered. Every creak of the house made me jump, half expecting Ethan to knock again. By evening, I was a wreck, torn between wanting to see him and dreading what it might mean. Around 7, my doorbell rang. My heart lurched, but it was only Sarah holding a plate of homemade cookies. "Jamie, you're a lifesaver for fixing that light," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "Ethan's been so distracted lately, I don't know what's gotten into him." Her words were light, but there was a flicker of worry in her eyes, and guilt twisted in my gut. I mumbled a thanks, took the cookies, and watched her walk back to their house, her blonde hair catching the porch light. I couldn't stay inside. Grabbing my jacket, I headed to the local bar, a dive called the Rusty Nail where I could drown my thoughts in cheap beer. The place was half empty, the jukebox playing some old Springsteen tune. I was on my second drink when Ethan walked in. My stomach dropped. He spotted me immediately, his expression unreadable, and slid into the booth across from me without a word. "You didn't have to run off last night," he said finally, his voice low, eyes fixed on the table. I gripped my glass, the cold biting my fingers. Didn't feel like sticking around for the awkward small talk. I shot back, sharper than I meant. He flinched, and for a moment, I saw the same vulnerability from the garage, raw and unguarded. "Jamie, He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not supposed to feel like this." His words hit like a punch, confirming what I'd both hoped and feared. I leaned forward, my voice barely a whisper. "Feel like what, Ethan? Say it." He looked up, and the weight in his gaze made my chest ache. Like I'm waking up for the first time. Like I've been lying to myself my whole life. His voice cracked, and he looked away, jaw tight. "I'm married, Jamie. I love Sarah. But when I'm around you," he trailed off, and the unspoken words hung heavy between us. The bar faded away, the noise blurring into nothing. I wanted to reach across the table, to tell him I felt it too, but fear held me back. "Ethan, you can't just say that and expect me to know what to do with it," I said, my voice shaking. "You're straight. You got a life. I'm just a guy next door." "You're not just anything," he said fiercely, his hand twitching like he wanted to reach out but didn't dare. I don't know what this is, but it's real, and it's killing me. The raw honesty in his voice broke something in me. And for a moment, I let myself imagine it. Us, together, no masks, no lies. But reality was a cold weight, pressing down. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face tightening. "It's Sarah," he said, standing abruptly. "I gotta go." He hesitated, then added, "Can we talk? Tomorrow? My place, after Sarah's at work." I nodded, unable to speak, and watched him walk out, the door swinging shut behind him. The next day dragged, each hour a battle between hope and dread. When Sarah's car pulled out of the driveway, I crossed the lawn to Ethan's house, my heart pounding. He opened the door, wearing a faded flannel shirt, his eyes tired but bright. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. The house smelled of coffee and fresh paint, a mix of comfort and newness that felt oddly intimate. We sat in his living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air. "I've been thinking about you," he said, his voice steady but laced with something fragile. "About what happened in the garage. I don't know what it means, but I can't pretend it didn't happen." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Ethan, you're married. You got a life most people dream of. Why risk it?" "Because it's not my life," he said, his voice rising. "It's what everyone expects. Perfect husband, perfect house. But I'm suffocating, Jamie. And when I'm with you, I can breathe." His words hit like a tidal wave, washing away my defenses. I stood, closing the distance between us, and for a moment, we just stared, the air thick with possibility. Then he kissed me. It was tentative at first, like he was testing the waters, but when I kissed him back, it deepened, urgent and desperate, like we'd both been starving for this. His hands found my face, and I felt the world tilt, everything falling away except the warmth of his lips, the steady beat of his heart against mine. When we pulled apart, breathless, reality crashed back. "What are we doing?" I whispered, echoing my words from the garage. Ethan's eyes were bright with tears. "I don't know," he said, "but I don't want to stop." And in that moment, neither did I. The days that followed were a blur of stolen moments and unspoken promises. Ethan and I found excuses to see each other. A broken faucet, a borrowed wrench, a quick coffee on his porch when Sarah was out. Each encounter was a tightrope walk, balancing on the edge of something beautiful and dangerous. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder of the life Ethan was risking, but the pull between us was stronger, like gravity we couldn't escape. One afternoon, we were in his garage again, working on his motorcycle. The air was thick with the smell of oil and metal, and Ethan's laughter filled the space as he recounted a disastrous attempt to change the oil himself. "You're hopeless," I teased, wiping grease from my hands. He grinned, that boyish smile that made my heart stutter, and tossed a rag at me. For a moment, it was easy, like we were just two friends, nothing more. But then he stepped closer, his voice dropping. "I told Sarah I'm going to a car show this weekend," he said, his eyes searching mine. "But I want to spend it with you. Just us." My breath caught. A whole weekend. No pretenses, no interruptions. It was reckless, but the thought of it lit something inside me. "Where?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "There's a cabin my family owns, up near Mount Hood," he said. "No one's using it. We could figure things out." The weight of his words settled between us, heavy with possibility. I nodded, unable to say no, and we made plans, quietly, carefully, like conspirators in a story we didn't fully understand. That Friday, we drove up to the cabin, the road winding through towering pines under a sky heavy with stars. The cabin was small, rustic, with a stone fireplace and a porch overlooking a lake that shimmered in the moonlight. Inside, Ethan built a fire, the crackle of wood filling the silence. We sat on a worn couch, close but not touching, the tension between us a living thing. "I've never done this," Ethan said, staring into the flames. "Not just this." He gestured vaguely between us. "But being honest about what I want. My whole life, I've followed the script, college job, marriage. I thought it was enough. He turned to me, his eyes soft but fierce. Then I met you, and everything changed. I reached for his hand, lacing our fingers together. You don't have to have it all figured out, I said. Not tonight. He squeezed my hand, and when he kissed me, it was slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing every second. The firelight danced across his face, and for the first time, I saw him without the weight of expectation. Just Ethan, unguarded and real. We spent the weekend in that bubble, cooking meals together, hiking the trails, laughing over stupid jokes. At night, we lay tangled in the cabin's creaky bed, talking about everything and nothing. His childhood in Ohio, my awkward teenage years, the dreams we'd buried under the weight of adult life. But reality loomed, a shadow we couldn't outrun. On Sunday morning, as we packed to leave, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She's asking when I'll be home, he said, his voice flat. The spell broke, and the drive back to Portland was silent, the air heavy with what we hadn't said. Back in the neighborhood, we slipped back into our roles. Neighbors, nothing more. But the distance was unbearable. I caught myself watching his house, waiting for a glimpse of him, my heart twisting every time Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. Then, one evening, Ethan showed up at my door, his face pale, eyes red-rimmed. I told her, he said, his voice breaking. Not everything, but I told her I'm struggling, that I don't know who I am anymore. My stomach dropped. What did she say? I asked, dreading the answer. He sank onto my couch, head in his hands. She thinks it's stress. Want me to see a therapist. But Jamie, it's not stress. It's me. And I'm terrified. I sat beside him, my hand hovering before resting on his shoulder. You don't have to do this alone, I said. But you have to be honest, with her, with yourself. He looked at me, tears spilling over, and pulled me into a fierce hug. I don't want to lose you, he whispered, and I felt my own tears rise because I didn't want to lose him either, but the path ahead was a minefield. That night, we sat together in the dark, holding on to each other like the world might slip away. I knew this couldn't last, not like this, but for now it was enough. The weeks that followed were a storm of emotion, each day a battle between hope and guilt. Ethan started therapy, telling Sarah it was for work stress, but he confided in me that he was trying to untangle the truth of who he was. We stole moments when we could, a quick coffee, a late-night talk in my backyard, but every touch, every glance felt like a theft from the life he'd built with Sarah. I hated myself for wanting him, but I couldn't stop. One rainy afternoon, I was in my garage, tinkering with a circuit board when Sarah knocked. My heart sank as she stepped inside, her umbrella dripping onto the concrete. Jamie, can we talk? She asked, her voice tight. I nodded, bracing myself. She sat on a stool, her hands twisting in her lap. Ethan's been different, she said. Distant. I know he's going through something, but he won't tell me what. You're his friend. Has he said anything to you? Her eyes were so earnest, so full of trust, that I felt like a traitor. He's been stressed, I said, hating the half-truth. Maybe just give him time. She nodded, but the worry in her face didn't fade. You're a good guy, Jamie, she said before leaving. I'm glad he has you. The words cut deeper than she could know. That evening, Ethan came over, his face drawn. Sarah's asking questions, he said, pacing my living room. She knows something's wrong, but I can't tell her. Not yet. I wanted to shake him, to demand he choose, her or me, truth or lies. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the weight of a life he wasn't ready to dismantle. What do you want, Ethan? I asked, my voice raw. Because this is killing me. He stopped, his eyes locking onto mine. I want you, he said, the words simple but heavy. But I don't know how to do this without hurting her. He stepped closer, his hand cupping my face, and I leaned into it, desperate for the connection despite the pain. We kissed, and it was bittersweet, a promise laced with uncertainty. The next day, disaster struck. I was at the hardware store when I got a text from Ethan. She found a note I wrote. About you. She's freaking out. My heart stopped. I called him, but he didn't answer. When I got home, Sarah's car was gone, and Ethan's truck was in the driveway. I found him in his garage, sitting on the floor, staring at the motorcycle like it could fix everything. "She saw a piece of paper in my wallet," he said, his voice hollow. "It was stupid. I wrote down how I felt about you, just to make sense of it. She thinks I'm having an affair." He laughed bitterly. "She's not wrong, but it's not what she thinks." I knelt beside him, my hand on his knee. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "I couldn't. She left to stay with her sister." The pain in his voice was a knife in my chest. I wanted to fix it, to take it all away, but I was part of the problem. "Ethan, you have to talk to her," I said. "You can't keep running from this." He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like he was already somewhere else. For days, Ethan was a ghost, avoiding me, avoiding everything. I threw myself into work, fixing radios and lamps, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind off him. But the neighborhood felt emptier, the silence louder. Then, one night, he showed up at my door, soaked from the rain, his eyes wild with determination. "I told her," he said, his voice steady despite the tremble in his hands. "Everything. That I'm not who she thought. That I'm in love with you." The words hit like a thunderclap, stealing my breath. "She's devastated," he continued, "but she deserved the truth. I'm moving out. I need to figure out who I am, Jamie, and I want you with me." I pulled him inside, out of the rain, and we stood there, holding each other, the weight of his words settling around us. It wasn't a victory. It was a beginning, messy and uncertain, but real. For the first time, I let myself hope, even as fear lingered in the shadows. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Ethan moved into a small apartment downtown, a temporary space while he and Sarah navigated their separation. He threw himself into therapy, peeling back layers of himself he'd never dare to face. I was there through it all. Late-night calls, quiet dinners, moments of doubt and clarity. Our relationship grew, tentative at first, then stronger, built on honesty and the kind of love that felt like coming home. But the neighborhood wasn't the same. Whispers followed us, glances from neighbors who didn't know the whole story but judged anyway. Sarah moved away, starting fresh in Seattle, and though she and Ethan found a fragile peace, the guilt lingered in his eyes. I carried my own guilt, too, for the part I'd played in appending her life. But Ethan's hand in mine, steady and warm, reminded me why we'd fought for this. One spring evening, we returned to the cabin near Mount Hood, the place where we'd first dared to be ourselves. The lake sparkled under the setting sun, and we sat on the porch, sharing a beer, the silence comfortable now. "I never thought I'd get here," Ethan said, his voice soft. "A year ago, I was terrified of this, of me. But you made it possible, Jamie. You made me brave." I leaned against him, my heart full. "You were always brave," I said. "You just needed to see it." He kissed me, slow and sure, and for the first time, there was no fear, no shadow of what might have been. Just us and a life we were building, one messy, beautiful step at a time. Back in Portland, Ethan sold his house, the one he'd shared with Sarah, and we moved into a new place together, a small fixer-upper with a garage big enough for his motorcycle and my tools. We spent weekends painting walls, laughing over spilled paint, and planning a future that felt like ours. The neighborhood slowly adjusted, some embracing us, others keeping their distance, but we didn't care. We had each other. One night, as we worked in the garage, Ethan handed me a wrench, his fingers lingering on mine. "You know," he said, grinning, "it all started with a broken light." I laughed, pulling him close. "Best fix I ever made," I said, and kissed him under the steady glow of the new fixture, the light warm and unwavering, just like us. The road hadn't been easy. Love never is when it challenges everything you thought you knew. But in that garage, in that moment, I knew we'd found something worth fighting for. A spark in the dark, a truth that set us free, and a love that left me breathless every single day.